Savannah Hayes had 1 week to save her family's legacy, a ranch steeped in generations of sweat and memories, now on the brink of ruin. Her only hope? A marriage of convenience to Weston Maddox, a man whose name whispered through Texas oil fields like a cold wind, known for crushing rivals and feeling nothing. She walked into the opulent Maddox estate, expecting a gilded cage, a life without love or laughter. She didn't know Weston would see past her forced smile, past the contract, to the fiery spirit that defied him at every turn. She didn't know her strength would be the one thing that could thaw his frozen heart, forcing him to confront a past he'd buried deep. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty land, a relentless reminder of the Hayes family's dwindling fortunes. Savannah stood on the porch of the old ranch house, its paint peeling, its timbers groaning, much like her own heart. The foreclosure notice, crisp and white, sat on the scarred kitchen table inside, a death sentence for generations of hard work and cherished memories. The ranch, her sanctuary, her heritage, was slipping through her fingers. Her younger brother, Caleb, still recovering from the accident that had shattered his leg and left him unable to work, sat pale and anxious in the living room. Her parents, their faces etched with worry lines that seemed to deepen daily, were out trying to secure yet another impossible loan. Savannah, at 26, felt the weight of their desperate hope pressing down on her shoulders. She was the strong one, the practical one, the one who always found a way. But this time, there seemed to be no way out. Then came the offer, delivered by an impeccably dressed lawyer with a chillingly detached demeanor. Weston Maddox. The name alone conjured images of dark suits, ruthless deals, and an empire built on oil and icy ambition. He was a titan, a legend whispered about in hushed, reverent, or sometimes fearful tones across Texas. And he wanted a wife. The terms were brutal in their simplicity. A marriage of convenience. A contract, not a covenant. In exchange for Savannah's hand, Weston Maddox would pay off the ranch's debts, ensuring its survival. There would be no love, no expectations of affection, only a public facade. She would be his wife in name, his hostess when required, and nothing more. The idea repulsed her, curdled her blood. Marrying a man she didn't know, a man rumored to possess a heart as cold and hard as the Texas crude he extracted from the earth. But the alternative, losing the ranch, watching her family splinter under the weight of financial ruin, was unthinkable. Savannah was a creature of the land, her hands calloused from years of working the ranch, her spirit as untamed and fiery as the wild mustangs that roamed the distant plains. She thrived on authenticity, on genuine connection. The thought of a life built on a lie, a gilded cage with a man who felt nothing, made her stomach churn. Yet, for her family, she would do it. She would swallow her pride, bury her heart, and walk down that aisle. The meeting with Weston Maddox himself was even worse than she had imagined. He arrived in a sleek black car, looking like a predator surveying his prey. Tall, impeccably dressed, with eyes the color of a winter storm cloud, he exuded an aura of detached power that made the air crackle. His face was chiseled, handsome in a stark, forbidding way, utterly devoid of warmth. He didn't shake her hand. He merely inclined his head, his gaze sweeping over her, assessing, cataloging, as if she were a piece of property. "Miss Hayes!" His voice was deep, gravelly, betraying no emotion. "You understand the terms?" Savannah met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I do, Mr. Maddox." Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "My family's ranch is saved, in exchange for my hand in marriage. A marriage of convenience, no emotional entanglement." A flicker, barely perceptible, crossed his storm-cloud eyes. perhaps a hint of surprise at her bluntness. "Precisely," he said, his lips barely moving. "Our lives will remain separate outside of public engagements. You will have access to funds for the ranch's restoration, within reasonable limits, and you will maintain appearances. Are we clear?" "Crystal, Mr. Maddox," Savannah replied, a touch of defiant fire entering her voice. She would play her part, but she would not be a malleable doll. She would maintain her dignity, her spirit, even in this gilded cage. He simply nodded, as if the transaction was complete. "The wedding will be in 2 weeks, a small, private ceremony. Details will be handled by my assistant. You will be moved to my primary residence tomorrow." Moved. Not invited, not welcomed. Moved. Savannah felt a surge of indignation, quickly tamped down by the crushing weight of her family's future. She was selling herself, yes, but she would do it with her head held high. She would become Mrs. Weston Maddox, a title that felt like a brand, and she would save her ranch. The scorching Texas sun felt cold on her skin, a stark contrast to the burning resentment in her soul. This was the beginning of her gilded captivity, a marriage devoid of love, but perhaps, just perhaps, a stage for a strength she didn't even know she possessed. The sprawling Maddox estate was a fortress of glass and steel, a stark, modern contrast to the weathered warmth of her family ranch. Savannah felt like an alien navigating its polished marble floors and austere, minimalist decor. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of art seemed perfectly placed, utterly devoid of the clutter and lived-in charm she cherished. It was a palace, yes, but a cold, echoing one, amplifying the chilling reality of her new life. Her personal suite, vast and luxurious, felt more like a museum than a home. Silk sheets, impossibly soft, covered a king-sized bed that seemed to swallow her whole. The walk-in closet was larger than her entire bedroom at the ranch, filled with designer clothes chosen presumably by Weston's staff. It was a gilded cage, precisely as she had anticipated. Weston Maddox himself was an elusive presence in the days leading up to the wedding. He was rarely seen, his towering office building in downtown Houston consuming most of his waking hours. When he was home, he was a silent, formidable figure, moving through the expansive house like a shadow. Their interactions were brief, formal, and strictly transactional. Discussions about the wedding guest list, which was surprisingly small, and the details of her new responsibilities as his wife. Savannah refused to be a docile ornament. While she understood the terms of their agreement, her fiery spirit rebelled against the idea of passive acceptance. She spent her days exploring the estate, not out of curiosity for its grandeur, but out of a desperate need to find a corner, any corner, where she could breathe, where she could feel like herself. She discovered sprawling, manicured gardens, but they felt too perfect, too controlled, lacking the wild beauty of her ranch. She sought out the kitchens, a vast industrial space, and surprised the wary staff by asking if she could help, instinctively drawn to the comfort of creating with her hands. The head housekeeper, a stern but ultimately kind woman named Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, watched Savannah with a cautious curiosity. Mrs. Rodriguez had seen many women come and go in Weston Maddox's life, none of whom had ever ventured beyond the master suite. Savannah's genuine curiosity and unassuming nature slowly chipped away at the housekeeper's reserved demeanor. One afternoon, a few days before the wedding, Savannah found herself in the enormous library, a room filled with towering shelves of meticulously organized, unread books. She ran her fingers over their pristine spines, a wave of melancholy washing over her. This house, for all its wealth, felt utterly devoid of warmth, of life. Weston entered, his presence suddenly filling the cavernous room. He held a tablet in his hand, his eyes focused on the screen, his expression as unreadable as ever. He paused, looking up, his gaze falling on her. "Enjoying the library, Miss Hayes?" His voice was devoid of inflection. "It's impressive, Mr. Maddox," Savannah replied, refusing to be intimidated. "Though I suspect most of these books are for show." A faint, almost imperceptible frown touched his brow. "They are part of the collection. I am a busy man. I had little time for leisure reading." "A shame," Savannah countered, her voice firm. "Books hold stories, Mr. Maddox. They hold empathy. Things that can't be bought with all the oil in Texas." His gaze sharpened, a flicker of something she couldn't decipher in his cold eyes. No one, she suspected, spoke to Weston Maddox like that. He was used to deference, to unquestioning obedience. "Our agreement, Miss Hayes, did not include philosophical discussions," he stated, his voice flat. "No, it didn't," Savannah agreed, meeting his gaze directly. "It included saving my family ranch, and I will uphold my end of the bargain. But it did not include me becoming a silent statue. I have a mind, Mr. Maddox, and a voice." A beat of silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken challenge. Weston Maddox simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowered his tablet. "So I see," he finally said, his voice softer, a hint of something resembling curiosity, perhaps even a grudging respect, in his tone. "That too will be a part of our agreement then. Your voice." He turned and walked away, leaving Savannah alone in the vast library, a strange, unexpected victory blossoming in her chest. She had challenged the cruel Texas tycoon, and he had, in his own taciturn way, acknowledged her. It was a small win, a tiny crack in the formidable wall he had erected around himself. The wedding was still days away, the contract still binding, but Savannah felt a flicker of defiance, a quiet promise to herself. She might be forced to marry him, but she would never truly be his prisoner. She would find her strength, her voice, even in the heart of his empire. The wedding was a blur of understated elegance, a testament to Weston Maddox's preference for efficiency over ostentation. Held in the grand ballroom of his estate, it was attended by a select few business associates, a handful of distant relatives, and her own immediate family, who looked deeply uncomfortable amidst the opulent surroundings. Savannah wore a simple, elegant gown, chosen by Weston's assistant, its pristine white a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions churning within her. She walked down an aisle adorned with white roses, her father's arm a steadying presence. Her gaze found Weston at the end, standing tall and unyielding, his expression as inscrutable as ever. He was handsome, undeniably, in the sharp lines of his tuxedo, but his eyes, when they met hers, held no warmth, no anticipation, only a cool, assessing gaze. This was a transaction, a merger, nothing more. The ceremony itself was brief, the vows recited in detached tones, a contractual agreement spoken aloud. When it came time for the kiss, a mere brush of lips, fleeting and passionless, it felt more like sealing a deal than uniting two lives. Mrs. Weston Maddox. The name felt alien on her tongue, a costume she now had to wear. The reception was equally formal, a polite mingling of strangers. Savannah did her best to play the part of the gracious hostess, circulating among the guests, offering polite smiles and answers to their bland inquiries. She watched Weston from a distance, a formidable figure holding court with powerful men, his laugh, when it came, a low, infrequent rumble that never quite reached his eyes. He was a man of immense power, undeniably, but also of profound solitude. Later, as the last of the guests departed and her family returned to the ranch, now miraculously safe from foreclosure, Savannah found herself alone with Weston in the vast, silent ballroom. The faint scent of roses lingered in the air, a poignant reminder of the charade. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "The agreement stands, Savannah. The ranch is secure. All financial arrangements have been made." "Thank you, Weston," she replied, her voice soft, the weight of the day settling heavily upon her. "My family, they are truly grateful." He simply nodded. "As for our arrangement, nothing changes. Your privacy will be respected. My schedule is demanding, so our interactions will be minimal, save for necessary public appearances. You are free to pursue your interests. Within reason, of course." Savannah felt a surge of indignation. "My interests? Mr. Maddox, my interests involve the Hayes Ranch. My life is being dedicated to that land. I understand my role here, but I will not abandon my family or my home. I will continue to work on the ranch within the bounds of our arrangement." His storm cloud eyes narrowed slightly. "You wish to continue working a ranch as Mrs. Weston Maddox?" There was a hint of disbelief, perhaps even disdain, in his tone. "That is hardly suitable for your new position." "My position is to save my family, Mr. Maddox," Savannah countered, her voice firm. "And I will do whatever is necessary. My hands are not afraid of dirt, my spirit is not afraid of hard work, and my commitment to my family will always come first, despite any contract." She met his gaze, her chin tilted in defiance. "If that is unsuitable, then perhaps you chose the wrong bride." A long silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken challenge. Weston Maddox simply stared at her, his gaze intense, assessing, as if seeing her for the first time. He was a man accustomed to having his will obeyed, his decisions unquestioned. Savannah Hayes was clearly not going to be that kind of wife. Finally he spoke, his voice low, a strange note entering it, almost a whisper of grudging respect. "Very well, Mrs. Maddox. Your access to the ranch will be arranged, within reason, as I said." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway, his hand on the frame. "Just try not to disgrace the name." Savannah watched him go, a faint smile touching her lips. Disgrace the name? She wouldn't disgrace it. She would redefine it. She was Mrs. Weston Maddox, yes, but she was also Savannah Hayes, the rancher, the protector, the woman who refused to be broken. The cold contract had been signed, but the battle for her spirit, and perhaps for a flicker of humanity in the cruel Texas Tycoon, had just begun. Life in the Maddox mansion settled into a strange, uneasy rhythm. Weston, true to his word, was largely absent, his days consumed by the relentless demands of his oil empire. Savannah, however, refused to wilt into a trophy wife. She quickly established her presence, not with demands, but with quiet determination. Her daily routine began early. She'd wake before dawn, dress in practical ranch attire, and have one of Weston's chauffeurs drive her to the Hayes Ranch. Her family, relieved and grateful, welcomed her back with open arms. The ranch, thanks to Weston's funds, was already showing signs of revitalization. New fencing was going up, equipment was being repaired, and the fields, though still recovering, felt like they had a fighting chance. Savannah threw herself into the work, her hands once again familiar with the reins of a horse, the feel of rich soil, the satisfying ache of honest labor. This was her truth, her grounding force. In the afternoons, she would return to the opulent, sterile mansion, shedding her ranch clothes for the designer garments expected of Mrs. Weston Maddox. She learned the intricate social calendar, attended charity galas, and hosted elegant dinners, playing her part with a grace that surprised even herself. She smiled, she charmed, she listened, a flawless facade of the wealthy socialite. But beneath the polished surface, her mind was always on the ranch, on the quiet strength she drew from the land. Weston and Savannah's interactions remained minimal, largely confined to formal dinners or public events. Their conversations were polite, superficial, orbiting around business, weather, or the trivialities of high society. Yet, Savannah noticed subtle shifts in Weston's demeanor. He watched her. His storm cloud eyes, though still cold, held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher, a silent observation. During one particularly stifling charity auction, a renowned art collector began to aggressively bid on a painting Savannah quietly admired. The man was boorish, his wealth displayed with an obnoxious arrogance. Savannah, feeling a surge of irritation, suddenly raised her own paddle, outbidding him. The collector, flustered, doubled his bid. Savannah, with a quiet determination, raised hers again. This continued for several rounds, the tension in the room palpable. Weston, who had been conversing in a corner, suddenly turned, his gaze fixed on Savannah. He watched, silent, unreadable. Finally, with a triumphant flourish, Savannah made one last, decisive bid. The collector, fuming, threw down his paddle in defeat. Savannah had won the painting, a vibrant, abstract landscape that resonated with her own untamed spirit. A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Weston's wife, the new Mrs. Maddox, had just publicly bested a notoriously aggressive bidder, and done so with an understated ferocity. Later that evening, back at the mansion, Weston surprised her by being in the main drawing room, a rare occurrence. He held a glass of amber liquid, his gaze distant. "A rather spirited display tonight, Mrs. Maddox," he remarked, his voice flat, but with an underlying tone she couldn't quite place. Savannah met his gaze, unafraid. "I merely acquired a piece of art I admired, Mr. Maddox. I see no need to apologize for that." "No apology expected," he said, taking a slow sip of his drink. "But you overpaid. Substantially." "Perhaps," Savannah conceded, walking towards the window, looking out at the manicured lawns bathed in moonlight. "Or perhaps I paid for the satisfaction of seeing that man's face. Some things are worth more than their monetary value, Weston." She used his first name for the first time, a deliberate challenge, a subtle claim of their shared space. His head snapped up, his storm cloud eyes narrowing. No one dared to use his first name without invitation, certainly not a woman he had married for convenience. A long, charged silence stretched between them. "Interesting," he finally murmured, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You have a fire, Savannah Hayes, a defiant one." Savannah turned to face him, her chin tilted. "I am who I am, Weston. I won't pretend to be something I'm not for your social circles, and certainly not for you. This may be a contract, but I refuse to be a quiet trophy. I am a rancher. I am strong, and I will challenge what I believe is wrong, regardless of the price tag." He simply stared at her, his gaze intense, assessing. A flicker, quick as lightning, crossed his eyes, something akin to surprise, perhaps even a grudging admiration. He seemed to be seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time. The silence stretched, pregnant with unspoken thoughts, with the nascent recognition of a strength he hadn't accounted for in their cold contract. The walls of his carefully constructed world seemed to subtly shift, and for the first time since their marriage, Savannah felt a hint of curiosity about the man behind the ruthless facade. The incident at the auction, and Savannah's direct challenge, seemed to subtly alter the atmosphere in the Maddox mansion. Weston's surveillance, once a distant, unreadable presence, became more focused, more deliberate. Savannah would often catch his gaze on her, a thoughtful, almost probing intensity in his storm cloud eyes. He still maintained his demanding schedule, but his presence in the evenings became less rare. His silent observation a new, unsettling, yet strangely compelling dynamic. Savannah, in turn, began to notice the subtle nuances of Weston Maddox. He was a creature of meticulous habit, his days precisely structured, his movements economical. He rarely smiled, and his rare laughs were always devoid of genuine mirth, more a social lubricant than an expression of joy. He ate his meals in silence, his focus unwavering on the papers or tablet he brought to the table. Yet, She observed the way his jaw would subtly clench when a phone call went awry, or the fleeting shadow that crossed his eyes when a news report mentioned a rival's success. He was a man under immense pressure, constantly battling, constantly striving. One evening, during a particularly dull society dinner at the mansion, one of Weston's business associates, a boisterous and slightly intoxicated man named Sterling, began to make thinly veiled, condescending remarks about Savannah's ranching background, implying that her family's financial woes were due to a lack of business acumen. Savannah, her politeness wearing thin, was about to offer a sharp retort when Weston, who had been silent for most of the dinner, subtly intervened. "Sterling," Weston's voice was low, cutting through the chatter, "I believe we were discussing the new drilling prospects in the Permian Basin, not the intricacies of agricultural economics." His gaze was cold, unyielding, a silent warning that brooked no argument. Sterling immediately stammered an apology, his face paling, and quickly changed the subject. Savannah glanced at Weston, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. He hadn't defended her directly, but he had silenced her detractor with an efficiency that was undeniably impressive. It was a small act, but it indicated a shift, a nascent acknowledgement of her position, perhaps even a nascent respect. The man who had married her for convenience was beginning to show faint cracks in his icy exterior. The next morning, determined to solidify her presence and perhaps even inject a bit of life into the sterile mansion, Savannah decided to take on a project. She noticed the vast, untended rose garden in the back, a sprawling, neglected expanse choked with weeds and overgrown bushes. It was a formidable task, but it called to her rancher's instincts, her love for coaxing beauty from the earth. She spent days toiling in the garden, dressed in old clothes, her hands familiar with the feel of dirt and the satisfying pull of weeds. She pruned, she trimmed, she nurtured, transforming the chaotic tangle into something resembling order. The head gardener, initially skeptical, watched her with dawning respect as she worked tirelessly, her brow furrowed in concentration, her determination unwavering. Weston, observing her from a distance during his rare moments at home, watched her with a silent intensity. He saw her covered in grime, hair escaping its bun, a stark contrast to the perfectly coiffed socialite he expected her to be. He saw the passion, the sheer force of will she brought to the task. It was a familiar quality, one he recognized in himself, though he channeled it into boardrooms and hostile takeovers, not rose gardens. One afternoon, as Savannah knelt amidst a particularly stubborn patch of thorns, carefully coaxing a fragile rosebush to health, she felt a shadow fall over her. She looked up to see Weston standing there, impeccably dressed as always, but his tie slightly loosened, a rare deviation from his rigid formality. "What are you doing, Savannah?" he asked, his voice low, a hint of curiosity in his tone. "Bringing this back to life," she replied, wiping dirt from her cheek with the back of her gloved hand. "It's neglected, but it has potential." He surveyed the tangled bushes, then back at her, his gaze lingering on her smudged face, her determined eyes. "It's a rather extensive undertaking." "Nothing worthwhile ever comes easy, Weston," Savannah countered, looking up at him, a faint smile on her lips. "You, of all people, should know that." A flicker crossed his eyes, a strange, unreadable emotion. He looked down at the thorns, then back at her. "No," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper, a rare moment of vulnerability. "It doesn't." He turned to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Rodriguez tells me you've also been assisting in the kitchen." Savannah straightened, a flush rising to her cheeks. "I enjoy cooking. It's familiar." He nodded slowly. "I see." He didn't elaborate, simply turned and walked away, leaving Savannah kneeling in the dirt. But this time, the silence he left behind wasn't cold. It was thoughtful, almost introspective. He was seeing her, truly seeing her, not just as a contract, but as a woman of substance, a woman whose true strength lay not in her new status, but in her unwavering passion for life, for nurturing, for turning what was neglected into something beautiful. And in doing so, a subtle shift was occurring within the impenetrable walls of Weston Maddox's heart. The rose garden, slowly but surely, began to transform under Savannah's persistent care. What was once a tangled, neglected mess gradually blossomed into a vibrant display of color and fragrance, a testament to her unwavering dedication. The head gardener, Mr. Davies, a man of few words, would now nod in approval, sometimes even offering a rare piece of advice or assistance. Savannah, with her practical rancher's knowledge, had earned his grudging respect. Weston continued his silent observations. He still worked relentlessly, but Savannah noticed that his brief moments of respite were increasingly spent gazing out at the burgeoning rose garden from his study window, or occasionally taking a solitary stroll through the paths she was meticulously carving. He never commented on her progress, but his subtle shifts in posture, the softening of his jawline, spoke volumes. The meticulously controlled facade was beginning to crack, ever so slightly, allowing glimpses of a man beneath the ruthless Tycoon. One evening, a fierce thunderstorm swept through Houston, battering the mansion with torrential rain and furious winds. The power flickered, then died, plunging the vast house into darkness. Savannah, accustomed to such events on the ranch, immediately sought out Mrs. Rodriguez, checking on the staff and ensuring everyone was safe. Weston, surprisingly, was home. She found him in his study, a faint glow from his tablet illuminating his stern profile. He looked annoyed, clearly unaccustomed to such inconveniences. "Are you all right, Weston?" Savannah asked, her voice calm amidst the howl of the wind outside. He looked up, his eyes catching the dim light. "A minor inconvenience. The generator should be online shortly." "Sometimes," Savannah said, walking to the large window and peering out at the storm, "it's good to be reminded that we aren't entirely in control. Nature has a way of humbling even the most powerful." He grunted, a non-committal sound. The power remained out. Mrs. Rodriguez, flustered, appeared in the doorway, apologizing for the delay with the generators. "It's fine, Elena," Savannah said gently. "Why don't you and the staff take a moment to rest? I can make us some tea, and perhaps a few sandwiches." Weston raised an eyebrow. "You intend to cook, Mrs. Maddox? In the dark?" "I've cooked in far worse conditions, Mr. Maddox," Savannah replied with a faint smile. "On a campfire, under the stars, with only a flickering lantern. A little darkness won't deter me. Besides," she added, her voice softening slightly, "a hot meal can do wonders for the soul, especially during a storm." She found candles and lit them, their soft glow casting dancing shadows on the walls. The kitchen, usually cold and industrial, took on a warm, inviting ambiance. She moved with practiced ease, assembling simple sandwiches, brewing tea over a gas burner. She brought a tray to the drawing room, where Weston now sat, illuminated by the flickering candlelight, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man simply waiting out a storm. He watched her place the tray on the coffee table, the rich aroma of tea and fresh bread filling the air. He picked up a sandwich, hesitantly, then took a bite. A subtle shift occurred in his features, a softening around his storm cloud eyes. "This is unexpectedly good, Savannah," he admitted, his voice quiet. "It's just a sandwich, Weston," she chuckled softly. "No," he corrected, looking at her, his gaze holding hers across the flickering candlelight. "It's more than that. It's comfort, something this house rarely provides." The admission hung in the air, a profound crack in his carefully constructed facade of detachment. It was the closest he had come to vulnerability, a tacit acknowledgement of the coldness of his own existence. Savannah felt a pang of unexpected empathy. He was a man who had built walls so high, so thick, that he had effectively imprisoned himself within them. They sat in comfortable silence for a long while. The only sounds the relentless drumming of rain against the windows and the quiet sips of tea. For the first time, their interaction felt less like a contractual obligation and more like a shared moment, two people finding unexpected solace in each other's presence amidst the chaos of the storm. When the power finally returned, flooding the room with light, the intimate bubble shattered. Weston immediately stiffened, his carefully constructed walls snapping back into place. The flicker of vulnerability vanished, replaced by his usual austere demeanor. "The generators are online," he stated, his voice flat once more. "Thank you for the refreshments, Savannah." Savannah simply nodded, a faint wistfulness in her heart. The moment had passed, but it had left an indelible mark. She had seen a glimpse of the man beneath the Tycoon, a fleeting hint of something yearning for warmth, for connection. She was beginning to understand that his cruelty wasn't malicious, but a protective shell, forged perhaps by a past she couldn't yet fathom. And as he retreated back into his world of power and solitude, Savannah realized that her challenge to him wasn't just about asserting her own strength. It was about chipping away at his defenses, about coaxing out the humanity he had so meticulously buried. The gilded cage was still there, but perhaps, just perhaps, a small window was beginning to open. The quiet intimacy of the thunderstorm night left a subtle, lingering resonance between Savannah and Weston. While Weston quickly reverted to his usual detached demeanor, Savannah felt a shift within herself. She no longer saw him merely as the ruthless tycoon who had bought her, but as a complex, guarded man burdened by unspoken sorrows. Her initial resentment began to temper with a reluctant curiosity, a faint empathy. Their interactions, though still formal, gained an almost imperceptible layer of unspoken acknowledgement. He would occasionally ask about the ranch, not about profits or yields, but about the progress of the new fences or the well-being of a particular mare. Savannah, in turn, found herself observing him more closely, noticing the subtle signs of exhaustion in his eyes after a particularly grueling day, or the faint lines of tension around his mouth when faced with a difficult decision. The rose garden continued to flourish, becoming a symbol of Savannah's enduring spirit. Its vibrant colors were a stark, defiant contrast to the mansion's sterile grandeur. One afternoon, as she worked among the fragrant bushes, lost in the rhythm of pruning and nurturing, she heard a soft cough. Weston stood at the edge of the garden, dressed in a rare, casual polo shirt and slacks, looking slightly out of place amidst the blooms. "The garden is impressive, Savannah," he stated, his voice hesitant, almost awkward. It was the first time he had directly complimented her efforts. Savannah straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. "It's a labor of love, Weston, like the ranch." He nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping over the vibrant roses. "My mother, she loved roses. This was her garden. Before." His voice trailed off, a rare moment of vulnerability in his tone. Savannah waited, sensing a delicate opening. "Before what, Weston?" she asked softly, her voice inviting. He exhaled slowly, a heavy sound. "Before she died, when I was a boy. The garden, it withered after that, like everything else." His eyes, usually storm cloud cold, held a fleeting shadow of profound sorrow, a glimpse into a past pain that had clearly shaped him. Savannah's heart ached with sudden understanding. His coldness, his detachment, his relentless drive, all stemmed from an early, devastating loss. He had built walls not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to protect himself from further pain. "I'm so sorry, Weston," she said, her voice genuinely empathetic. "Losing a mother so young, that's an unbearable burden." He merely nodded, his gaze distant, lost in memory. The moment of vulnerability passed as swiftly as it had appeared. He cleared his throat, his posture stiffening, the facade settling back into place. "I merely came to inform you that there's a gala next week. Important clients. Appearances will be crucial." "Of course," Savannah replied, the sudden chill in his demeanor a stark reminder of their contractual reality. The small window into his past had closed, but it had left an indelible impression on her. She now had a key to understanding the enigmatic man she had married. The week of the gala was a whirlwind of preparations. Savannah chose her gown with Mrs. Rodriguez's input, opting for a deep emerald silk that shimmered with every movement, a color that reminded her of the lush Texas landscape after a good rain. She wore minimal jewelry, preferring to let the dress and her own natural elegance speak for themselves. The gala itself was a glittering affair, a testament to Weston's immense influence. The cream of Texas society, powerful figures from the oil industry, politics, and finance, filled the opulent ballroom. Savannah moved through the crowd with grace and confidence, charming guests with her genuine smile and astute observations. She was not just a pretty face on Weston's arm. She was intelligent, engaging, and utterly herself. Weston, usually aloof at such events, found himself subtly drawn to her orbit. He watched her, captivated, as she navigated complex conversations with effortless ease, her laughter genuine, her presence radiating warmth. He saw how she commanded respect, not with power, but with authentic charm and innate strength. The admiration in his eyes, once a fleeting flicker, was now more pronounced, less guarded. At one point, a notoriously difficult investor, Mr. Caldwell, cornered Weston, attempting to strong-arm him into a disadvantageous deal. Caldwell was known for his aggressive tactics, and Weston's usual response was a cold, cutting dismissal. However, as Caldwell pressed, his voice growing louder, Savannah subtly stepped closer. "Mr. Caldwell," Savannah interjected smoothly, her voice calm but firm. "I believe Weston was just explaining the long-term projections for the new South Texas fields. The preliminary reports, from what I understand, indicate a far greater return on investment in the next fiscal quarter, making your current offer, while generous, perhaps a tad premature." She smiled, a dazzling, disarming expression that nonetheless held a steel edge. "Unless, of course, your own projections differ significantly?" Caldwell, taken aback by her unexpected intervention and her surprisingly detailed knowledge of the oil market, stammered, his bluster deflating. Weston, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, watched the exchange, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of amusement and fierce pride. Savannah had not only diffused the situation, but had subtly, cleverly turned the tables. Caldwell, red-faced, quickly retreated. Weston turned to Savannah, his storm-cloud eyes, for the first time since their marriage, alight with a genuine, unadulterated admiration. "Impressive, Mrs. Maddox," he murmured, his voice low, a warmth in it she had never heard before. "Very impressive indeed. Where did you acquire such insight into oil projections?" "My father's taught me a thing or two about reading the land, Weston," Savannah replied, meeting his gaze directly. "And the energy industry, at its core, is just another kind of land. You just have to know how to read the signs." He continued to stare at her, a profound realization dawning in his eyes. She wasn't just a contract, she was a partner. A force. A woman whose strength lay not just in her defiance, but in her intelligence, her intuition, and her unwavering authenticity. The cold contract that bound them was slowly, irrevocably igniting into something far more complex, far more dangerous, and far more exhilarating. The walls around Weston Maddox's heart were not just cracking, they were beginning to crumble, brick by agonizing brick, under the relentless fire of Savannah's true strength. The gala became a turning point. Weston's admiration, no longer merely grudging, was now evident in his gaze, in the subtle ways he lingered in Savannah's presence. He began to seek her out, not for formal discussions, but for quiet conversations in the evenings, drawn to her refreshing honesty and keen insights. He found himself confiding in her about the complexities of a new deal or the frustrations of a challenging negotiation, something he had never done with anyone before. Savannah, in turn, offered not just a listening ear, but intelligent observations and surprisingly astute business advice, drawing parallels from her ranching experience. She saw the intense pressure he lived under, the immense burden of his empire, and a deeper layer of respect, even affection, began to bloom in her heart. Their conversations often extended late into the night, sitting by the flickering fire in the drawing room. He would talk about his work, about the relentless pursuit of expansion, the constant battle for dominance. Savannah would talk about the ranch, the cycles of nature, the challenges of working with the land rather than against it. They were two vastly different worlds, yet they found common ground in their shared drive, their unwavering determination, and a growing, unspoken understanding. One evening, after a particularly lengthy discussion about a potential hostile takeover, Weston surprised her by asking, "Why do you stay, Savannah? The ranch is secure. You could walk away from this contract, from me." Savannah met his gaze, her heart unexpectedly racing. "Because," she said, her voice soft but firm. "A contract is a contract, Weston. I gave you my word. And because I'm curious about what kind of man hides behind all this power and coldness, curious about the man who sometimes, very rarely, lets come a flicker of something human show." She paused, then added, "And because I see a man who carries a great weight, perhaps I can help lighten that burden, even just a little." His storm-cloud eyes widened, a profound depth of emotion swirling within them. No one had ever spoken to him with such raw honesty, such genuine insight. He looked away, a muscle twitching in his jaw, clearly unaccustomed to such vulnerability. The walls were trembling. A few days later, a crisis erupted at one of Weston's remote oil fields. A critical piece of machinery had broken down, threatening to halt production and incur massive losses. Weston, usually meticulous in his planning, found himself facing unforeseen complications, frustrated and stressed. He barked orders, his temper frayed. Savannah, witnessing his agitation, calmly approached him. "What's the problem, Weston?" He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "A crucial drilling rig. Parts are scarce, and the specialized technicians are weeks away. Every hour means millions." Savannah listened intently, then a thoughtful expression crossed her face. "Sometimes, when a piece of ranch equipment breaks down and we can't get the exact part, we have to improvise. Create a temporary fix using what's available until the proper repair can be made. It takes ingenuity and understanding the mechanics, not just the manuals." Weston stared at her, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "You think you can improvise a multi-million-dollar drilling rig?" "I think," Savannah countered, her chin tilting, "that the principles of heavy machinery, whether for farming or for oil, often share common ground. And I know a few things about making do with what you have. Let me look at the schematics. Just let me see if my rancher's ingenuity can offer a different perspective." Weston hesitated. Then, against his usual rigid protocol, he handed her the detailed schematics. Savannah spent hours poring over them, her brow furrowed in concentration, her rancher's mind seeing patterns, identifying potential points of stress and alternative solutions. She sketched out a few ideas, simple, practical modifications that might offer a temporary workaround. When she presented them to Weston, he looked at her sketches, then back at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning fascination. "This is unconventional, but it might just work." He dispatched a team to the remote site, armed with Savannah's crude drawings and her daring suggestions. Days later, a call came through, a report from the field manager, his voice filled with stunned relief. Savannah's rancher's ingenuity had worked. The temporary fix, though unorthodox, had allowed them to resume partial operations, stemming the massive financial bleed. Weston found Savannah in the rose garden, tending to her blooms. He approached her, his face devoid of its usual mask of impassivity. There was an awe in his storm cloud eyes she had never seen before. "You saved me millions, Savannah," he said, his voice low, thick with a mix of gratitude and something deeper. "You truly are remarkable." He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin. It was the first truly tender touch he had ever offered. "You see beyond the numbers, don't you? You see solutions where others see only problems." Savannah leaned into his touch, her heart thrumming. "I see what needs to be done, Weston, and I'm not afraid to do it." He nodded, his gaze softening, a warmth spreading from his eyes to his lips as he allowed himself a genuine, slow smile. It was a rare, breathtaking sight, transforming his formidable features into something unexpectedly captivating. "No, Savannah," he murmured, his voice husky, "you're not. And I'm beginning to realize that's exactly what I've needed all along." The touch, the smile, the admission of need shattered the last vestiges of their contractual arrangement. What began as a cold transaction had slowly, irrevocably ignited into a scorching, undeniable connection. The cruel Texas tycoon was confronting his demons, his carefully constructed walls crumbling under the relentless fire of Savannah's true strength, and a love he never dared to dream of was beginning to take root. The temporary fix at the oil rig, orchestrated by Savannah's unconventional ingenuity, had not only saved Weston millions, but had also irrevocably altered the dynamic between them. The professional respect he had grudgingly given her had deepened into something far more personal, far more profound. The rare, genuine smile he had bestowed upon her lingered in Savannah's mind, a beacon of warmth that promised a thawing of his formidable exterior. Weston began to actively seek out Savannah's company, not just for business insights, but for conversation, for companionship. Their evenings, once filled with polite silence, now hummed with a newfound intimacy. He spoke of his childhood, a stark, lonely existence after his mother's death, of his father's relentless push for him to succeed, to build an empire that could never be lost. He revealed the deep-seated fear of vulnerability, the belief that showing emotion was a weakness that could be exploited. Savannah listened, her heart aching for the lonely boy he had been, the man he had become, trapped by his own emotional armor. She, in turn, shared more about her life on the ranch, the simple joys of working the land, the strong bonds of family, the deep-rooted sense of belonging. She showed him a world beyond boardrooms and balance sheets, a world where strength was found not in dominance, but in resilience, in nurturing, in enduring. The physical barriers between them also began to soften. Their touches became less formal, more frequent. A light brush of hands across a table, a comforting touch on the arm when one expressed frustration. These small gestures, imbued with growing affection, spoke volumes. The mate bond, once a cold, contractual bind, now hummed with a quiet, persistent warmth, a burgeoning connection that both thrilled and terrified Savannah. Could this truly be happening? Could the cruel Texas tycoon be falling in love with her? One weekend, Weston surprised her by suggesting they visit the Hayes ranch. Savannah's heart leaped. It was a significant gesture, a willingness to step into her world, to understand the roots of her strength. Her family, initially surprised, quickly warmed to Weston's presence. He was still reserved, but he listened intently as her father spoke of the land, of the challenges and rewards of ranching. He watched Savannah interact with her brother, Caleb, with an almost wistful expression, clearly unused to such open displays of familial affection. During their visit, a small crisis arose. One of the old irrigation pumps, despite recent repairs, sputtered and died. Her father, frustrated, was ready to give up for the day. Weston, however, surprised everyone. He knelt beside the pump, his sharp mind analyzing the mechanics. He asked Savannah's father questions, genuinely listening to the answers, and then, slowly, meticulously, began to work on it himself, his hands, usually accustomed to sleek keyboards, now surprisingly adept at handling tools. Savannah watched him, a profound warmth spreading through her. He wasn't just a tycoon, he was a man capable of humility, of getting his hands dirty, of solving problems with practical skill, not just brute force. Together, they fixed the pump, Weston's quiet determination complementing her father's years of experience. As the water began to flow, gushing forth into the parched fields, a shared sense of accomplishment settled over them. Weston looked at Savannah, a genuine smile gracing his lips, his storm cloud eyes filled with a pride that seemed to encompass not just the repaired pump, but her entire world. "This is different," he admitted, his gaze sweeping across the vast expanse of the ranch, his voice soft. "This kind of satisfaction, it's real. It's about creation, Weston," Savannah explained, her hand instinctively reaching out to touch his arm. "Not just acquisition. It's about nurturing, about making things grow." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her touch. "I've only ever known acquisition, always taking, never truly creating." The admission was raw, vulnerable, a stark reflection of his lonely past. Later that evening, back at the mansion, a newfound intimacy permeated the air. The unspoken feelings between them had grown too powerful to ignore. As they stood in the drawing room, the city lights twinkling outside, Weston turned to her, his gaze intense, earnest. "Savannah," he began, his voice low, a tremor of vulnerability in it. "What began as a contract, it's become something I never anticipated, something I never thought possible." He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands, his touch tender, almost reverent. "I see your strength, Savannah, your fire, your unwavering heart, and it's slowly thawing something in me I thought was long dead." His eyes, for the first time, held no shadows, no coldness, only a profound, heartfelt longing. "I need you, Savannah, not as a wife by contract, but as a partner, a confidant, a companion. I want to learn how to feel again. With you." His thumb stroked her cheek, his gaze unwavering. Can you ever forgive the terms of our beginning? Can you truly allow me in?" Savannah's heart swelled, tears blurring her vision. This was the moment she had both dreaded and yearned for. He was opening up, truly, agonizingly opening his heart, risking everything he had carefully protected for decades. The cruel Texas tycoon was gone, replaced by a man desperate for connection, vulnerable, and utterly, achingly human. "Weston," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "There's nothing to forgive. We both did what we had to do. And you've shown me a side of yourself I never thought existed, a side that is worth fighting for." She leaned in, her eyes shining with unshed tears, her love for him blossoming, fierce and undeniable. "Yes, Weston, I can allow you in, all the way in." And as she reached up, her hands tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer, the kiss was not a formal brush of lips, but a searing, desperate connection, a culmination of months of unspoken emotions, of crumbling walls, of a love that had defied logic, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of a cold contract. The gilded cage had melted away, revealing a future built not on obligation, but on true strength and a scorching, undeniable love. The kiss was a revelation, a profound physical manifestation of the emotional barriers that had finally crumbled between them. It was not gentle, but fierce, born of longing and the raw vulnerability of two souls finally connecting after months of guarded distance. Savannah felt Weston's arms tighten around her, pulling her against his powerful frame, as if he never wanted to let her go. The touch was possessive, yet tender, a silent promise of everything they had both secretly yearned for. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Weston's storm-cloud eyes, now soft and luminous, searched hers, filled with an emotion so raw, so powerful, it stole her breath. "Savannah," he murmured, his voice husky. I don't know what to say. I never imagined." "You don't have to say anything," Savannah whispered, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Just be here, with me." From that night forward, the Maddox mansion, once a cold monument to power, began to transform into a home. Laughter, genuine and unrestrained, began to echo through its halls. Weston's schedule remained demanding, but he made time for Savannah, for long walks in the reblooming rose garden, for quiet evenings by the fire, for late-night conversations that delved deeper into their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. He shed his formal attire for more casual clothes when they were alone, gradually shedding the layers of his emotional armor as well. Savannah continued to nurture the Hayes ranch, but now with Weston's full, enthusiastic support. He no longer viewed it as a mere financial transaction, but as a living legacy, a part of Savannah's soul he now shared. He invested his time and considerable resources, not just to keep it afloat, but to help it thrive, implementing sustainable practices and modernizing its operations, always deferring to Savannah's deep code, knowledge and love for the land. He even learned to ride a horse, albeit awkwardly at first, much to Savannah's amusement and her family's delight. He was slowly, painstakingly, integrating himself into her world. The changes in Weston were profound, visible to everyone around him. His staff, accustomed to his stern, unyielding demeanor, were bewildered and then cautiously pleased by his newfound warmth. Mrs. Rodriguez in particular watched Savannah with a knowing smile, recognizing the transformative power of genuine love. Weston's business associates, initially perplexed by the softened edges of the ruthless Tycoon, soon discovered that while he remained sharp and decisive, he now possessed a nuanced understanding of people, a strategic empathy that made him an even more formidable yet respected force in the industry. He was still Weston Maddox, the oil magnate, but now he was also a man with a heart. Despite the joy and blossoming love, there were still moments of vulnerability, particularly for Weston. He struggled with trust, with allowing himself to truly lean on another person. His mother's death and his father's subsequent emotional distance had instilled in him a deep-seated fear of loss, a conviction that dependence led only to pain. Savannah recognized this struggle. She didn't push him, but patiently offered unwavering support, demonstrating through her actions that her love was steadfast, her presence constant. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations, Weston returned to the mansion visibly drained. Savannah met him at the door, her smile gentle. She led him to the drawing room, where a fire crackled invitingly. She simply sat beside him, offering a comforting silence, a warm hand in his. "It's hard," he confessed, his voice rough with exhaustion. "To let go, to trust that it won't all crumble, that you won't leave." The unspoken fear of abandonment, rooted in his childhood trauma, was palpable. Savannah squeezed his hand, her gaze steady. "I'm not going anywhere, Weston. We built this, what we have, together. It's real. And I'm here. For all of it. She held his gaze, her heart radiating an unconditional love. You don't have to carry the weight of the world alone anymore. Let me in. Let me share it. He looked at her, his storm cloud eyes glistening, and for the first time, Savannah saw a flicker of the lonely boy he once was, finally allowing himself to be seen, to be comforted. He leaned into her, his head resting against her shoulder, his powerful frame trembling slightly. It was a silent admission of surrender, a profound act of trust. Their love story, born from a desperate contract, had transcended its transactional origins. Savannah Hayes, the fierce rancher, had broken through the formidable walls of Weston Maddox, the cruel tycoon, revealing the compassionate, vulnerable man beneath. She had not only saved her family's ranch, but had rescued his heart from the cold confines of his past. As the seasons turned, the Hayes Ranch thrived, a testament to resilience and unwavering love. The Maddox name, once associated solely with ruthless power, now carried a new resonance, one of philanthropy, of quiet generosity, of a powerful man transformed by the strength of a remarkable woman. Weston and Savannah, standing side by side, no longer bound by a cold contract, but by an unbreakable, scorching love, proved that even the most formidable walls could be dismantled, and that true strength often lay not in power, but in the courage to let love all the way in. Their life together became a testament to the unexpected beauty found when two vastly different worlds, brought together by circumstance, discover a shared, enduring spirit.